But you gotta believe, have faith in your Father to reap what I have sown. Oh.
In my direction, he's leaning in my direction. Come on, y'all.
That leaning is favor.
Yeah,
he's showing you favor.
In my direction.
Don't take advantage of it in a wrong way.
He's leaning.
Be a blessing to others with it.
In my direction. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Take the theological lessons from that song. This is my season to reap. Doesn't stop there. Reaping depends on prior activity. One shouldn't expect to reap without the prior activity. The song continues, to reap what I have sown. We don't use that terminology often. Sowing just simply means planting. Planting. Somebody's ugly to me. I don't return that. I'm kind. I'm planting kindness. I'm planting perseverance. I'm planting long suffering. I'm planting things in seasons that don't feel right. And because I keep planting those things, because I keep sowing those things, I have an expectation that a season is going to come when I can reap what I have sown. I don't always have to be put down. I don't always have to be stepped on, mistreated. I don't always have to expect that. There may be a season when I am in that space, but I can also expect that another season is coming. And so remember that now. Don't return evil for evil. Don't do it. I know it's hard. Oh Lord, it's so hard. You need God's help. Not to just do the natural thing. Somebody cuss you out, you want to cuss them right back out. But you got to get mature enough. When they cuss you, pray for them, shock them. And I don't mean that old street way, I'm going to pray for you. I ain't talking about that one. No, I'm talking about sincerely. Lord help them. Lord help me right now, help them too. And move on. You don't have to be wordy. Plant the seed. Yeah. And then one day, sit back and watch what God does in your life. Not that he has to do anything, because you use two words that modify that. This is my season for grace. Define it, unmerited favor. Grace is unmerited favor, which means I'm not earning this. God is giving it to me. He's blessing me with this. And favor, come on now, favor. It ain't fair. It ain't fair. How many of y'all say all the time, that ain't fair? That ain't fair. Life ain't fair. Life is not fair. Yes. And if you look at your life over the whole spectrum, you've gotten better than you've taken. Oh. Ooh. All of my good days outweigh my bad days. So I won't complain. Come on now. No, sir. No, it's going to come off the tracks. Yes, sir. My name ain't Kev. All right, I can't do. But it's true. It's true. Come on, y'all. We've been in a sermon series the last 3 weeks entitled Powerful Verses. Powerful Verses. Excuse me, because there are some Bible verses that people actually quote. They say all the time that I think have extraordinary power. But I don't know that we always understand what they mean when we say it. Excuse me. Sometimes people say it, and they say it from a secular standpoint, not even realizing that what they're saying is a Bible verse. And so we've been trying to work through those. We started out talking about it a few weeks ago. We told you about the life of Joseph and that statement in his life, out of all that he had been through, the climax of the story is him meeting the brothers who had sold him into slavery. After God had elevated him through slavery, through prison, through horrible things, had elevated him to be the prime minister of Egypt. And he now has the opportunity to give back what was given to him. And he utters the statement that I love: you meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. And he rescued his family and all the Hebrew people. Yeah, it's not always an easy journey. And then the next time we got together, we talked about another hero of the Old Testament, Joshua. Joshua, on his deathbed, took the time to utter in his final will and testimony to the people of Israel some guidance that we still need to follow today. He told them, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. Yeah, you've already seen what God can do. Yeah, you want to pin your hopes on all these little g gods? That's up to you. But today you need to choose whom you will serve. Whether it was the gods we served over in Egypt or the ones we found when we came into this promised land, you got to choose whom you will serve. And then last week, we talked about Jesus and his disciples. And they were sitting around having one of those conversations that you have when you are wondering what your tomorrow is going to be like. Everybody has those conversations. What will I be doing in a year, 5 years? And the disciples in their discussion, one turned to Jesus and said, Lord, when you come into your kingdom, let me sit on your left hand. My brother sit on the right hand. They were already planning for a season of prosperity. And Jesus took that opportunity to ask them if they really knew who he was. And so he asked them, who do folks say that I am? That's the question you and I have to answer today. Who is he to us? And they compared him to the saints of old. They compared him to the most prominent prophets in the Old Testament. They compared him to his cousin, John the Baptist. This was a high honor for Jesus, according to them, never understanding that Jesus Christ was already higher than all of the ones they named. But the question is, did they understand who he was? And out of the 12 of them, only one came up with the right answer. The most impetuous one, the one who spit out stuff without even thinking about it. But the one who had faith enough to walk on water for just a moment. Yeah. The one who was brash enough to cut off a man's ear when they tried to take Jesus. But also the one who cussed out all the folk at the fire after Jesus was snatched and crucified. I want you to understand Peter's life in total. I can make him into a hero, but I'd rather him just be a man. I'd rather him just be regular. Because some days you have your days of cussing, and some days you have your days of praying. And it doesn't mean that God's not with you. We want to have more days of praying than cussing. We want to grow more. Now, if I'm telling the truth, I want to get better. And Peter told him, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to him, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you." Flesh and blood couldn't tell you that I'm God's son. And so today we want to go into one more. We want to go to someone who entered the portal when things got hot, changed teams on him. He was working for the prosecution, but when things got hot, he was working for the Aints. In fact, he was the lead runner for the Aints. Yeah, but the window opened, and that window was open for about 3 days when he was found on the Damascus Road. Yeah. And he ran toward our team and became a saint. And his name is Paul. When he was on the other team, his name was Saul. Yeah, you know you got to get new branding when you go to the other team. Saul didn't work for him anymore. God gave him another name that fit the work that he was going to do. And he ended up going to the Saints team and writing 2/3 of the New Testament. But it didn't come easy. First of all, the saints that existed, the old members of the team, didn't accept him. They didn't trust him. Isn't this the same Saul who sent out cursings against us? Isn't this the same Saul, can I tell you, who was present when Stephen was stoned to death? Isn't this the same Saul who was an accessory after the fact? Took away all of the bloody clothes when they stoned Stephen to death? It's the same Saul who now comes and greets us as brother in the name of Jesus Christ. This is the Saul we're talking about. And this Saul, after many years now, is giving guidance on how we should live as believers in Christ Jesus. That's the same Saul who would have just as soon killed Jesus on sight. And now he would have us to live a life in devotion and faith to him. And he does want us to do that. That's the Saul I'm talking about. But he's no longer Saul. He's Paul of Corinth. And he's Paul. And he is talking to the church at Philippi about some of the issues that they're having. I'm sorry, Paul of Tarsus. Thank you, Karen. Fact checking, man. If it ain't Google, thank you. It is Paul who is guiding us in this discussion, and it's one every one of us is going to have with ourselves. He writes to the church at Philippi, a church he's very familiar with because he spent so much time with them. This passage of Scripture is powerful and familiar. It's found in the 4th chapter. verses 10 through 13. Paul writes, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again, wherein ye were also careful, but ye lacked opportunity." Verse 11 is our pivotal verse. "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content." I have learned to be content. Easy to read, hard to live. I've learned to be content. And then he says, "I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need." And then he says the one that we take out of context all the time, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." Paul, writing to his friends at Philippi, friends for sure, because he's being brutally honest with them in his writing. Let me tell you, and then I'm going to sit down. This church is a struggling church, full of love, lacking resources, full of want in terms of helping, but they're struggling because they can't supply their own needs, let alone help Paul with his ministry. And yet Paul celebrates them for what they're doing towards him. If you go back into the Acts of the Apostles, and for those of you who don't know, the Bible's not written chronologically. These letters flow sometimes and refer back to the Acts of the Apostles, which is the beginnings of the early church. If you go back to the 16th chapter of the Acts of the Apostles, you'll find that when Paul first arrived in Philippi, he was mistreated. In fact, they accosted him when he got there. He was flogged and beaten and thrown in prison. But this church still came up. And so because of the struggles that he went through with this church, they grew to love one another. They grew to support one another. And he could count on them no matter what. Even after his ministry there in Philippi left and he went to other regions to found other churches, he could depend on them to always, as they say, send him a little something. Support him on the way. But now he's writing to them because Paul is on house arrest. The Romans have him on house arrest. And he doesn't have much time left. And the Philippi church knows it. But while they want to support him, the context of where they're living at that point is they're under persecution themselves. It wasn't easy being in the way, as they called it. That's what they call Christians. It wasn't easy living like that then. They were persecuted left and right because they were still considered remnants of that street preacher they called Jesus. And so they were meeting from house to house and running, and in some instances hiding from the authorities. This is the context that Paul is writing this letter. Not only were they suffering persecution in the church, there were problems. Yeah, it's not always external persecution. Sometimes it's internal confusion. And they were acting selfishly in the church. The one thing that they had at the early church that was so beneficial was holding everything in common. If I needed something, I got it. In order for me to help my family, in order for me to help the church, all things were held in common honestly. Remember now, there's a man and his wife that got killed because they lied to the church. Yeah, you didn't pray about it. If you're going to give, fine. But if not, don't. But don't lie and say you are. God showed at the beginning that he wouldn't tolerate that. And so members were acting selfishly, and then there was false teaching arising. Whenever there's confusion in the church, those who don't want the truth of the Lord to come out will create falsehoods. And Paul is away, but he's hearing because messengers are coming to him while he's under house arrest. And the last thing he has to do in there, even while he's away, is he specifically deals in that 4th chapter with 2 women in the church who are arguing with each other. It's crazy. He's specifically dealing with them, calls them by name. Can you imagine? Euodias and Syntyche. I probably mispronounced her name, but it's in the Bible. Yeah, they were into it for whatever reason, and Paul tells them to calm down, chill out in this Bible. Can you imagine whatever it is they were arguing about? Here it is all these years later, recorded in history, that they were having some kind of meltdown with each other, and the apostle has to break into the discussion to try to calm them down. Yeah, it's right there. Read it right there. Verse 2, chapter 4. Yeah. I beseech, and he calls their name, that they be of the same mind in the Lord. In the Lord. It's this backdrop that then propels him to write this verse that I'm talking about that's so powerful. This church that's struggling with all these issues, internal, external, no resources, persecution, everything they got, they're using to make the church itself function. But they love Paul. And he says, I know you love me. That's what he says. That's what I can interpret this for you. He said, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me, in other words, the fact that you support me, has flourished. It's flourished again. What you could send me, you sent to me. And I appreciate it. He said, wherein you were also careful, but you lacked opportunity. In other words, I know you wanted to do more, you just didn't have more to do. And then he tells them, and this is what you ought to tell folk, but it's okay because I'm okay where I am. I may be locked up, but I'm okay. I may be in house arrest, but I'm okay. I got what I need every day in terms of eating. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Just take care of the house because I've learned it's not what I have, it's who I have that makes me okay. And it's not the fact that I have a plate with certain things on it every day. It's the fact that I know whatever circumstance I find myself in, he'll take care of me. This is the message that he's trying to convey to them. And all these many years later, he's telling us we got to learn to have a faith that is grounded in Christ. That sounds hard. We got faith in too many things that mean nothing. The first thing we got too much faith in is ourselves. We've made idols out of ourselves. Yeah, we think we can do anything. And can I tell you, all life has to do is shift. Just a millimeter. And life is upset. Everything you've been planning, come here, Doris. Donnell, you can't plan your life on paper. That's what she used to tell me. And she was certainly right. Because if I had, I'd have lost the paper that I was planting it on. It was a good plan, though. If I could find that notebook, that spiral-bound notebook. I've learned to be content. Everybody reads that passage and they run straight to the word that brings action, content. I've learned to be content. But Pam, that ain't the action in the sentence. The most important part of that sentence is I've learned. Y'all need to hear me. I've learned. How do you learn? You go through something. That's how you learn. You learn by going through something. And some of us have learned the hard way what life is all about. Some of us have struggled, but we've learned. Some of us have had plenty of material things, but we've learned that you can have a house full of stuff and be miserable in the house. I've learned that everything that I spent my life working toward had no meaning for me. I got everything I sought to get. And when I got there, it still felt empty to me. It's just right on TV every day. You can live in the Mecca called Hollywood. You can spend your life making millions of dollars. You can be a mansion full of all the best things. And in a day, a fire can come and wipe out everything. Everything. And you say, well, they rich. All they got to do is build over. They got insurance. Guess what? Some of them don't. Some of them don't. And tell me this, what kind of insurance do you have to give you back your baby pictures? What kind of insurance do you have to get all the mementos that you've saved all your life? Oh, they can make you another Oscar. They probably will do that, but an Oscar don't keep you warm at night. Yeah, you can't take the most precious things in life and protect them from the bad things in life. You can lose your whole material life, watch this now, and still be content. That's what Paul is saying. Paul is saying, can I make a popular context from it, a today context? Paul is saying, I stood on the Palisades in LA and I watched the fire come by and burn my whole house down, but I'm all right. I've learned to be content. I've learned that if I got a house on the hill, I'm okay. But if I'm standing here and there's nothing for me to have, he says, I'm okay. That's the message. I've learned through life's lessons to be content. Sometimes my friends taught me the lesson. Sometimes my enemies taught me the lesson, but I've learned. Sometimes my family taught me the lesson, but I've learned. Sometimes I was the victim in the learning. Sometimes I was the villain in the learning, but I've learned. Right now, if you want to save yourself some misery, learn. Don't ignore the lessons. Don't think that folk did something crazy to go through bad things. Sometimes people have done nothing and bad things still come to them. Sometimes people have, in fact, done everything just like they were supposed to, and bad things still come to them. Yeah. And sometimes, y'all don't want to walk with me on this one, some people have intentionally done everything wrong. Your folk told you to go left, you went right. Your folk told you to go up, you went down. Your folk told you not to go, you made sure you went. Everything you could do wrong, you did, and nothing happened to you. You got lulled into thinking that there were no consequences for wrong. And then life shows up one day and tells you today is the day. Oh yeah, today's the day. you got to give an account for everything you've been doing. Today's the day. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year. But the songwriter said, Father alone will know all about it. Father alone will understand why. Cheer up, my brother. Live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. So let me tell you this, and I'm out. What you have, thanks, Dan. What you have is not an indication of your security. It's not. What someone brings to you or gives to you, what you work and get, that's not your security. It's not. No, and it won't lead to you being content. Oh my goodness. I know folk who have spent years saving for a house. Years. You know, taking pickles and onions for lunch every day. I mean, just whatever. I mean, you know, they never eating out. Not that you got to do that, but what I'm saying is they were being as frugal as they could be. Frugal as they could be, and they finally got the house of their dream in the neighborhood of their dream. And they got in the house of their dream and were absolutely miserable in the house of their dream because they had spent so much to get the house, they had failed to make a home. And because of how they had lived, their spouse was unhappy. Because of how they lived, their children didn't want to hang around and be around them. So they got the house and nothing else. Because a house is not a home. It's not. I can take you back a few years. I can take you back a few years to when our community seemed to be flourishing. When there were big families living in small houses. When there were 10 children living in 3 rooms in a house. When everybody got a good meal every day on the way out the house and could expect one on the way back. Yeah. When mama didn't even go to work, mama was a homemaker. Everything they needed came from whatever job daddy could get. But they always had the material things they needed. But more importantly, they knew they could depend on one another. I remember those days. And now we all got houses. Everybody got their own house across town. We rarely spend time together. We don't. There's no contentment there. It's just where we are, but that's the life we have now. I think Paul was advising us that we spend too much time acquiring things and not loving each other. I think he was telling us that whether I got a lot or a little, I'm content. And I came to tell you this morning, contentment is the key. It's what you want. Contentment brings the peace from God in life that you want. And so if you don't take anything else away from what I'm telling you today, take this away. Love people. Support people through the good and the bad. Support people. And guess what they'll do? They'll support you. They'll support you. But even if they don't, you can still be content. Now, I'm here to tell you this now. This verse is powerful because Paul teaches something that's counterintuitive. And the reason it is because Paul grew up in that day in the lap of luxury. He did. He grew up in the lap of luxury. He was a Jew of Jews. He had teaching from the best schools. He was destined to be a leader of the synagogue. He had favor in the community. He could walk into all the leaders and they respected him. He walked away from that, became a tent maker, traveled the country, starting churches as he went. The same church that he didn't even believe in when he first started out. And yet it's this Paul who is telling us, I've learned to be content. Nowhere in his writings do you hear him say, I miss my old life. Nowhere does he say that. He said, I've learned to be content. And I don't want for anything. So I came to ask you today, are you content? Are you? Are you content? Are you searching for something that you just can't ever seem to find? We always say people are searching for love in all the wrong places and looking for love in all the wrong faces. I came to tell you that the same contentment and peace that Paul had, you can have it too. Because the source of his peace, the source of his contentment was in Jesus Christ. Now, when I was preparing this sermon, I got to that point and I said, Andre, that sounds so easy. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for people to understand that he is the source of contentment? And what the Lord gave me is because they don't believe in Jesus. Because they don't have faith in him. You won't believe he's the source of your contentment if you don't believe in him. You can't believe it. You don't know what he did for you. You don't know that he too was already a prince in heaven. You don't know that God was already his father. You don't know that God asked him. Oh, let me say this. He agreed. The plan was that he would come to earth and live just like us. But you got to believe this. It sounds unbelievable that somebody would give up royalty, riches, righteousness, heaven, and come here and live for us. But he did. And until you believe this, it's going to be impossible for you to put your faith in him, and it's going to be impossible for you to find that contentment. But I can tell you that is the way. That's the way you're going to find it. You got to come to a faithful knowledge in Jesus Christ, coming and living for you and dying for you. I want you to learn about him. I want you to understand about him that he loves you. He loved you enough to come, and he loved you enough to die for you. But that wasn't the end of the story. If that was the end of the story, we wouldn't be here today. The story continued after he died for you. God loved him enough to resurrect him. That means he was dead, and God put life in him again. And now he lives. And he's assured us that the same thing that happened to him can happen to us too. We can live forever just like him. But you got to believe it. You got to believe it. And you got to follow his guidance and his teachings. And that's what brings contentment. Do you believe it? Do you believe in him? Maybe you didn't know he did that for you, and today's the first day you found out about it. Maybe today's the first day you heard it for real, that he died for me. I can tell you, you're sitting around a lot of people in here right now who had to believe the same thing. Can I ask you right now, if you believe that Jesus died for you, raise your hand right now. Yeah. See, it's not so crazy. All these people. If you believe that you're going to live forever with Jesus, raise your hand. Yeah. If you know that you once were lost, but you know you found now, raise your hand. Yeah. Everybody's got to walk the same walk. Everybody's got to do the same thing. And if you were unable to raise your hand to any of those questions, then you got to find out what Jesus Christ means to you. And so I'm inviting our leaders to come and welcome you if you decided that you want to give your life to him. Try Jesus. Try Jesus. Try Jesus. We're offering him, come learn about him, come learn to live for him and with him. That's all we're doing every day. We're not perfect by any long shot, but we're trying to live a better life. It's the day-to-day. Yeah, we're offering him to a relationship with him. He'll give you brand new life. Yeah. He loves you. 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 He loves you enough to die for you. Yeah, he loves you. Help us, Lord. I'm content in that knowledge. He loves you. Yeah. Yeah. He will give it to you.